Okay, I'm going to bring people in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Words, and First Looks, a cover reveal event for Jungle of Ashes by Brynn Barineau. Super excited to do this event. I have allowed you guys to have your mics, I guess they open automatically. So if you could just go ahead and mute your mic, you can open and close your mics at any time because I do want to keep this kind of a casual, fun event. If you want to chime in, this is really informal. But the four of us here, I'm Colin Mustful, the founder and editor of History Through Fiction. We have Brynn Barineau, the author of Jungle of Ashes and Jaguars and Other Game, which comes out May 19th. We have Jillian Forsberg, who is a History Through Fiction author of The Porcelain Menagerie and of The Rhino Keeper. And then we have Carolyn Hewitt, who is a narrator for all three of the books that I previously mentioned. And so, yeah, we're here just to kind of hang out, talk about Brynn's book, and Carolyn's going to do a live performance for us. And so it should be pretty fun. So the first thing I want to start with is, since we're just kind of hanging out, and the title does say wine. Now, I am not a wine drinker, so I brought hot chocolate in my new mug that a friend of mine bought me.
Colin, you're so cute.
Thank you. It says, if at first you don't succeed, try doing what your editor told you to do the first time. And I'm like, of course, I'm the editor here, so I like that. So Brynn, why don't you say hello and let us know, do you have a beverage tonight?
I do. Well, I am joining from Atlanta, and last night in my house, I had to turn the air conditioning on because it was 71 degrees. And so I have Prosecco. It's cool. And I feel the first event for Jungle of Ashes needs bubbles. So I have bubbles.
Definitely a night to celebrate. Jillian, if you could say hello and let us know what's in your glass.
Hello. I have my daughter's Stanley that I thought just had water in it, and this is definitely some sort of watermelon flavored children's drink. So I'm gonna ask her later what this is.
That sounds delicious. And Carolyn, if you could say hello and let us know what's in your cup.
Hello, I'm dialing in from New York City where it is drizzly, and I also have a hot chocolate in my.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Any marshmallows?
I wish. No. I love having whipped cream or marshmallows, but I did not get that together tonight.
I find the marshmallows help keep the temperature steady rather than cooling off
A little
very fast.
insulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Wow, that feels like advanced hot chocolate knowledge. I did not know that. I do not drink enough hot chocolate in Georgia. The marshmallows maintain the hot chocolate temperature.
Another
Okay.
tip, use 2 packets of hot chocolate mix just to get a little tastier. Yeah.
It's generally never chocolatey enough if you follow the recipe. I agree.
Okay.
Oh, totally.
Well, I want to thank everyone again for joining us. If you could say hello in the chat. If anyone wants to chime in and say hello, please feel free and maybe let us know if you're drinking Prosecco or wine or hot chocolate. Please feel free to chime in.
So what we've established in the first few seconds is I'm the only one that will be tipsy by the end of this conversation. That's what we've
I
established.
feel like the sugar high is real though. I feel like, I'm gonna have a little bit of a nice buzz from the hot chocolate for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot
I
of sugar in
may
mine too.
I may fall asleep, honestly. I may fall asleep. But this way, it's Friday, it's late. I'm going on pure adrenaline at this point.
Well, we have Joe drinking red wine, so we have somebody who's partaking in wine. We have Kara Barineau from Atlanta, guessing a family member.
That's my stepmom.
Another Atlanta with barbecue chicken. French.
Nice.
We have coffee with French vanilla cream and sugar. Okay, they're all flooding in now, so that's great. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully you can just kind of relax and enjoy those beverages or barbecue, whatever the case might be. We are here to celebrate the forthcoming novel, Jungle of Ashes. So, Brynn, what is this novel about?
Jungle of Ashes is, I call it a critique of unchecked power through the eyes of star-crossed lovers. And it is set on Henry Ford's rubber plantation in the Amazon in 1928 through 1945. My book takes place in the first 2 years, 1928 to 1930, and it follows Joanna Rogie, who is the daughter of the assistant manager, and they ventured to the Amazon when her father is assigned to be assistant manager of the Fordlandia rubber plantation. And so they go all the way from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to the middle of the Amazon, where Henry Ford bought a huge tract of land and decided he was going to bring all of his American industrialization to farming rubber in its native habitat, the Amazon. And the story is what happens when Joanna meets a young Brazilian mechanic who is there working on the plantation, and then follows them for the course of the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's super fascinating history. I mean, I honestly knew nothing about Fordlandia when you submitted this novel. Tell us a little bit more about your background. Obviously, you lived in Brazil. When did you come across this history and decide you wanted to tell a story about it?
So Fordlandia is pretty common knowledge in Brazil. And I moved to Brazil after graduating from college a very long time ago in 2005. And I met my now husband in Washington, D.C., and he is from Rio de Janeiro. So I moved to Brazil, and we lived in Brazil for 14 years before coming back to Atlanta. And people know about Fordlandia there. Even if they don't know exactly where it was, they know Henry Ford had a farm in the Amazon. And I kept hearing about it over several years. And it just was wild. I was like, Henry Ford tried to farm the Amazon rainforest. And like, oh, yeah, you can still visit. There's still remnants of the town are still there. And so eventually I was like, I have to read more about this because this story sounds crazy. And I have to see if it's as crazy as it just sounds to my, modern day sensibilities. And it was as crazy as it sounds. A bunch of guys who built cars in Michigan were like, we're going to go farm rubber in South America. And I read, and I'm going to show this off at every talk I give about this book, because this is what inspired my novel, Jungle of Ashes. This is a nonfiction. And it was a National Book Award finalist, Fordlandia, The Rise and Fall of Henry Ford's Forgotten Jungle City by Greg Grandin. And if you are at all interested in the full scope of this, colossal, ultimately tragic endeavor, highly, highly recommend Grandin's book. And my book, Jungle of Ashes, only covers not even half of the whole saga. So if you read Jungle of Ashes and you want to learn more about the real story of Fordlandia, I highly recommend Grandin's book.
Well, Melissa points out you have a lot of post-it notes in there. I couldn't help but notice as well.
Yes.
Just kind of shows what kind of work goes into historical fiction. You have to really know what the history is.
And then I didn't even use the post-it notes in the 2/3 of the book, because by the time I thought of the story, I realized it was going to take place during just a couple years, those 2 very specific years at the start of the project. And so I didn't even need all the rest of those notes that I took.
Well, let's go to Jillian. Jillian was one of the first readers of the final draft, and Jillian wrote a very lovely blurb that is on the back cover. So, Jillian, tell us about your experience reading it and what you thought of this story.
Well, I think the first thing that really stuck out to me was the setting itself. We often associate the Amazon or anything with a jungle setting with a specific kind of person who's going to live there. And it almost seems like, I don't know how else to say it, but a little Stepford in the jungle. The setting is very peculiar in a way that it makes it feel like everything is fake, that the danger must be fake because the houses that they build look like they're in Michigan. Everything is muted until it's not. And that also goes for the love story that's woven into this book, because it's so subtle and well done that I was so immersed in the setting, I didn't even realize there was a love story unfolding until it was just upon you. Both of my novels deal a lot with ambition and they deal a lot with animals. And I was trying to think about if I could even share what my favorite scene is in this book, and I can't because it would be a huge spoiler. But I will say it is definitely dealing with an animal, and Brynn knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I have to say, this is really fascinating for me. So I went to college at McPherson College in McPherson, Kansas, and it's the only 4-year automotive restoration school in the nation. It's a small liberal arts school, and they have this entire program full of what we lovingly call on campus the auto rats. And Colin and I were in McPherson for my book tour, and on campus we were talking about to a huge class, probably 100 kids or so of these auto rat kids, about what you can do with a history degree. And we actually started talking about Brynn's book. One of them asked Colin, like, what's next for you? What are you publishing next? And when we said Fordlandia, all of them were like, oh, those students knew exactly what it was, and they were so intrigued and engaged. You could see like their eyes get bigger the moment we started talking about it. And they started talking about Henry Ford in a way that, as someone who's never really studied him before, and this was before you sent me the book, I was like, what do you mean he was kind of crazy? Like, I'd never heard of that. Like, I knew that he invented a whole bunch of important stuff and did the assembly line, and like, without him we wouldn't have Ford. And they were like, no, this dude was nuts. And Brynn's book shows that in a way that isn't really in your face, but there's this little thread throughout it of what danger comes next. And is it from a person? Is it from the environment? Is it from the animal? Or is it from the choices that everyone is making? And it was so intriguing and so well done. I kind of want to go to Fordlandia, but I don't really want to go to Fordlandia.
You could just have to get a riverboat and go there. There's a
Sounds
tiny
safe
little
and
hotel.
fine.
You could. It'd be fine.
Brynn, have you
Like a
been
day
there?
trip.
Did you go?
I have not been to Fordlandia. I have been to the Amazon. But I was not on the top of Jos, which is where Fordlandia is. So the Amazon rainforest is many big rivers. There's not just the Amazon River. There are many rivers that feed into the Amazon to make it as big as it is when it hits the Atlantic. And I was on the Rio Negro, and then feeds into the Amazon, which is a little west of where they were. So I have been to the Amazon. So I can visualize how insane it would be to think we're going to chop all this down and just make a field of rubber trees. Especially if you're talking about in 1928, like how they were going to do that. But yes, it took a certain level of hubris to think. I mean, when you are the richest person in the world, you really don't have a sense of reality anymore. I think it might be impossible to have as much wealth as Henry Ford did and be normal in any sense of the word.
And with that, who's going to put him in check? Who's
No
going to,
one. Yeah.
no one. No one's going to give him a reality check and say, this might not be the best idea. No one's going to tell him that. And I can draw so many parallels to the antagonist that I wrote in the Porcelain Menagerie. And the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, what do we do when a rich guy oversteps his boundaries? Well, you kind of have to watch what the common person does to rebel in small ways in order to make themselves feel safe. And in return, it kind of snowballs into that person's face a little bit.
But it's also so cool in this book because we know that Mother Nature is always going to beat all humans. And so I found that to be like, even though Brynn, you do such a beautiful job of constantly reminding us how dangerous it is, it also was like, I felt that the protagonist knew this, and we also know that ultimately the earth wins, right? Like in this setting. And so I felt that was very reassuring.
It is. I mean, our protagonist, Joanna, she loves the forest, but is not naive about how dangerous it can be. She is just more curious than she is afraid of it.
So Carolyn, you got to read this as a narrator. Well, obviously that's a little different approach. How much are you actually able to enjoy the story while you read it versus your...
This story really took me away. It really captivated me. I sometimes would be like, oh, I forgot. So I always go through and highlight all the different characters' lines, and I would go for pages being like, whoops, I didn't highlight the lines because I just was reading it, which was so fun. And yeah, I mean, I think this... I do genuinely enjoy the stories that I'm reading, but also this one was so beautiful in terms of the love story and also in terms of the the mother and daughter story, which I found equally captivating to the love story. And it was really exciting. As a narrator, a lot of the things about reading this were exciting. The different languages, and the time that passes really was exciting too, in terms of the mother-daughter relationship. I felt like their voices would change as the story went on. And so that was really fun to play with. And Joanna's learning of Portuguese was also really fun to play with. So in addition to the pleasure of the story, it was also really exciting doing my first read as a narrator, because I knew there would be so much cool stuff to sink my teeth into that I don't always get an opportunity to work on in every book.
I did not realize when I was writing this, I never once thought ahead to how difficult this book would be for a narrator, and all the Portuguese that's in there, and the Portuguese that has to be spoken at different levels of competency. So you have to, how Joanna sounds when she first arrives versus how Joanna sounds a year and a half later, and after having classes, and then just the native Brazilian speakers. And I mean, y'all, Caroline learned Brazilian accents. So you can tell in the audiobook who, if it's a Brazilian or an American speaking. And I was just, when we were first corresponding about the audiobook, I told my husband, like, oh my gosh, there's actually so much Portuguese in this book. I did not even think about that. So sorry about that, Caroline.
No,
I made it really hard.
I love it. I love it. And I wish as I mentioned to you, I speak French, and I thought, oh, this is another Romance language. This will really help. Ha 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 ha. No, I feel like Portuguese is, for me, it was almost really didn't help. But one really cool thing about narrating an audiobook with a lot of another language is I become able to understand once I really get, a sense of what the different sounds are. I get it, well, we'll see. You're listening now. You'll tell me if I got it. But it's really exciting, even zooming out from the book itself, to get a taste of what another language is like, and to say words that I don't know how they would feel in my mouth if I didn't get a chance to say them out loud. So that was a gift to me to have that experience.
Well, and Carolyn, what an exciting thing for you to be so realistic with the learning of words. You're not an expert at Portuguese, and neither was the character. So there's such authenticity there that is a gift, and I really want to listen now.
Yeah, it was very cool to have a character who was learning Portuguese when I was trying to wrap my mind around it as well. So it was a good way in.
Well, I'll have Carolyn read an excerpt for us in just a minute, but before she does, Brynn, maybe you can kind of key people in on just the extra layer of work that goes into producing a book now in audio. And Jillian, you can speak to this too, but Brynn, you and your husband actually recorded accents for Carolyn, and now you're proofing the novel. Maybe just tell people a little bit of the background of what goes into making an audiobook possible.
Sure. So again, I learned this for the first time here. This is the first time one of my books has been narrated and is going to be an audiobook. So that is thrilling. And I learned so much because the audiobook provides another level of characterization that the written text does not. Because you can tell so much about a person based on how they speak, how they treat someone's name, how they pronounce it, the effort they give, how close they get to getting it right, and do they try again? Does their pronunciation change over time as they get more comfortable? That is a reflection of character and values of the character. So I realized that by narrating the voices of these characters, and specifically how certain Americans might say a Brazilian's name, you get a glimpse into that person's personality, their values, who they respect, who they don't respect. And that's just a level of insight to the characters that the written text can't provide, and isn't explicitly stated in the written text. It isn't stated how Joanna says Raphael's name versus how her dad says Raphael's name. And so that had to be discussed in emails back and forth. And then we have Brazilian characters, and we have American characters, and American characters saying words in Portuguese, Brazilian characters saying words in Portuguese. And so how will that word sound different depending on who is saying it? So my husband and I, over Christmas break, we went through the whole book and got all the Portuguese words in every chapter, and got all the Brazilian names. And we recorded for each chapter all of the words in the order they appear. And he said them as a native speaker in his Brazilian accent, and I said them as an American with my American accent. And we sent all those files to Caroline. She ended up with lots and lots of audio messages.
And it was so helpful. I really have never had an author have that much attention to detail linguistically, and it was so, so helpful. And I will say that I feel like my ear couldn't hear sometimes, like the way your husband was doing it. I didn't know how to make that sound. So it was really helpful having your version as well, because I could get my ear around it a little bit more. It was amazing.
That is so
So
fascinating.
cool. So helpful. Thank you.
So, Brynn, when you were doing that, did you also give character notes? That was one of my favorite things about working with Carolyn, was I told her one of the protagonists in my book is basically a mixture of Voldemort, Donald Trump, and the bad guy from Dune. Do what you will. But when you're doing that with
That's
accents
the
and
king
things
of
like
Porcelain
that,
Menagerie, right?
yeah,
That's,
it totally is.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally. I was like,
So-
Voldemort, Donald Trump. It's like, oh, I know exactly who that is.
Yes. Which, I mean, when you do that and you give free reign to an audiobook narrator in order to take your characters to the next level, I feel like you do need to give them those character descriptions. So you did the audio, but did you also give her like, this person is also a little shy, or like, did you go through your characters like that? And I wonder, do you feel like it was difficult to do that in like 2 sentences?
I'm trying to remember. Caroline, did I ever tell you like personality notes? I definitely highlighted education level. And when I was giving names, because that, especially for the people coming from the United States, would change if they were like from the forest, and then also regional. Like one of the Americans is from Texas, and the others are from Michigan. So that makes a difference in terms of accents. But I think mostly we just focused on pronunciation because it was such a huge, huge thing. And because Brazilian Portuguese has sounds that don't exist in English. They don't. So if you've never practiced Brazilian Portuguese, like Caroline, your ear really won't hear them because that's not a sound that you are used to making or recognizing at all. So I still, after 14 years in Brazil, have a thick accent when I speak Portuguese.
Well,
And I feel
Brynn,
that-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
in terms of those character notes, I feel like it was, and Jillian, this is true for your books as well, in my opinion, that I love your character notes, but it's not always necessary because you have both written them so well into the stories that I glean from that initial read and then kind of brewing on them and thinking about them, hopefully close to what you intended for them to be.
I'll tell you, Joanna sounds spot on. I've been listening, like Joanna is like what I heard in my head. It's kind of wild.
Yay.
That's so exciting.
I was shocked when I heard roguey. I said rogue in my head every time I read it.
That, Colin, I also, when I was writing the book, was saying rogue in my head. But then when I realized I had to say it out loud, I was like, I actually don't know. He was a real person. So this name exists. And so I did a bunch of research, and overwhelmingly the name is pronounced Rogie.
I like
We
Rogie
dealt with the
because-
same thing with Douwemout Vandermeer, and Colin and Carolyn and I had meetings about how to say the main character in the Rhino Keeper's name. He was a real person. And I always said this in like book clubs and stuff. I said, you can call him whatever you want to call him because we can't go back to 1740 and ask him how to say his name. He's not going to get offended. Whatever your brain needs to say. But for Carolyn, we have to tell her something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's also from where I sit, you have to have it something that people can listen to, right? Like I love them being called roguey because that implies words that we already know in English that might have something to say about their character too. And with Dawa, right, Jillian, if I recall, you said it was pronounced, maybe initially you said it was pronounced do or something like that, but we realized that would be way too confusing for listeners because that's a verb, like
exactly. Yeah, or a dewdrop. And either way, it's like, what did I just hear him do? Do? We can't do that.
what did do?
Well, Brynn, can you set up this excerpt?
Yes. So I'm so glad Jillian and Caroline both mentioned the setting, because the excerpt Caroline is going to read is when Joanna and her mother first arrive in Brazil. They have literally, the ship has docked and they have just gotten off the ship. And they have been summoned down. Her father's been in Brazil for a year, and they've been summoned down because the Ford company established a new policy that the families of the American managers need to be down there. And this is true to check the bad behavior of the American managers left alone in the Amazon. So they get a summons that the Ford company is going to pay for everything and send them to the Amazon. Yay! Isn't that nice of the Ford company? So Joanna's very excited. Her mom a little less so. Her mom's a little anxious. And so Caroline's going to read when they first arrive, get off the ship in Brazil.
Take it away.
She'd read the locals called the Meeting of the Waters the Face of Santarém. The dark emerald waters of the Tapajós flowed in from the west towards the clay-colored waters of the Amazon, and where they met, the rivers formed an undulating line that stretched into the horizon. The Tapajós didn't merge completely with the Amazon for miles. As they crested a hill, the meeting point came into view and stole Joanna's breath. It looked as though God were a child who had scribbled the world into existence with different crayons. They took a launch out, and the captain cut the engine with the boat half in the Tapajós and half in the Amazon. Bobbing between the green and brown waters felt like floating on oil paints. Joanna put down her pencil long enough to dip a flask first into the Amazon River, then cross the boat and dip a second into the Tapajós. She nestled the souvenirs in her satchel next to her journal. Back on Santarén's shores, she collected shells, sand, and a palm frond nearly as long as she was tall. The space between her and her mother on the back seat had filled with Joanna's collection of specimens by the time they finally pulled up to their hotel. Dinner was grilled tambaqui, a local freshwater fish whose skeleton, to her mother's great dismay, Joanna sketched after eating. She ate a soup that made her lips tingle and drank juice of a fruit she couldn't pronounce. When her mother conceded that the fried bananas were in fact delicious, the day became the best of Joanna's life, and she carried the small victory with her to bed and breakfast the next morning, when they drank coffee so strong it could have been served without a cup. They spent their final hour in Santarém touring the Church of Our Lady of the Conception. The carved statues of saints and holy figures along the walls made the sanctuary feel to Joanna more like an art museum than a church. "Have you noticed how many women have statues?" Joanna asked her mother. "Aren't they all Mary?" "I don't think so." Joanna read a plaque beneath one woman with a hand over her heart and a crown. "They all have different names." "Whoever they are, I think they deserve a little more care," Maggie said. "They're falling apart, like everything else here." The observation startled Joanna. She'd thought the statues beautiful, but a second look showed cracks in the wood and a couple missing fingers. Her mother's words stayed with her, and Joanna took a second look at everything they'd passed the day before. She noticed the chipped paint and battered wood of the fishing boats. Stately two-story homes sat behind walls that were white once upon a time. The ornately carved saints in the church had mildew between their toes. She realized the air was heavy with humidity and a sense of futility. Whatever grandeur Santarém had achieved during the rubber boom 40 years earlier had been impossible to maintain without the steady hum of international trade and surrounding the city, the Amazon waited, reclaiming territory one moldy, holy toe at a time. But Ford was here now.
Yay. Thank you, Carolyn. That was so great. Such beautiful words, so well performed. So right now, Brynn, you have a chance to hear those words performed. You're proofing the audiobook. What's that? You talked a little bit about that, I think, before we started our meeting. What was that like hearing?
It's been wild. So I have been listening to the audiobook. I'm only on chapter 4. What I've learned is a really big book. Why didn't my editor tell me to cut some of those words in that book? I'm on chapter 4. I've been listening to it during my commute, and it really feels like someone else wrote those words. They don't even feel like my words anymore. Like, it's, wow, this book is really good. Who wrote this book? Wow, it's amazing. So it's been really fun. It is just this weird, I don't know, not really out of body, but like out of mind. Like those words came from someone else's mind. And it's been really just amazing to hear my characters from outside of my own head.
Well, I want to let people know that they will be able to order the audiobook once we get it up. So we're still in the process of putting it all together, but it will be available through traditional channels of Amazon, Libro FM. You'll be able to get it at your library through Hoopla and Overdrive and all those sorts of places. Right now, you can pre-order the paperback, which is already up on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and those places. And then anyone who, thank you, who did an add-on for this event, like I will get those audiobooks to you once they are available. And we do plan on shipping out anyone who pre-ordered a paperback. If you get it directly through us, I'll ship those out later next month. Same thing with if you pre-ordered Jaguar's Another Game. We are going to show the cover if you haven't seen it already. We're going to hold off a little bit on that. Before we do, let's transition, Brynn, to Jaguar's Another Game. How did this come about? Because you already published it in 2022. Why are we talking about it again?
So I published in 2022 with an indie press out of Florida, and that was my debut novel, and the elevator pitch for Jaguars Another Game is a gender-flipped Three Musketeers set in colonial Rio de Janeiro.
Oh,
And I had an agent for that, and we queried everywhere, like every US-based publisher, and the feedback was, we don't want a book set in Brazil. There's not an audience for a book set in Brazil. And then we found an amazing publisher, Ariel, Orange Blossom in Florida, who was like, nope, I don't care where it's at. This is a really great story. So much fun. I learned so much while having fun. It's a great historical adventure. We'll publish it. But that was the first historical fiction title published by Orange Blossom. They are primarily women's fiction. So looking back, it was not the best fit in terms of audience. Like the number of people that Orange Blossom could reach who read historical fiction was not very big. And I was a brand new author, so I didn't have a lot of connections in the industry yet, author to promote. I mean, getting blurbs was an absolute nightmare because I didn't know anybody yet. So it was just really hard to promote Jaguars and get it the audience I think it deserves. So after, I signed with History Through Fiction for Jungle of Ashes, and we were working together, and I was just like, God, I really like working with Colin. History Through Fiction seems great. They have this amazing newsletter, such an amazing community, all these like community activities and these workshops and these, book clubs, and they're historical fiction readers. So as the contract, and what's typical with indie presses a lot of times is the contract, at least for Orange Blossom, was only for a few years. So as the contract expired in November, I emailed you, Colin. I was like, hey, Colin, do you want to, go in halvesies on re-releasing Jaguars Another Game? And fortunately, you said yes. So now Jaguars gets a second life, and I think it's going to find its audience this time through the History Through Fiction community. And I'm so excited for new readers to find it because I do love my Three Musketeers in Rio. It's the vibe is a little bit different than Jungle of Ashes. Jaguars is much more of a historical adventure, a la Disney's Three Musketeers or the first Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, Princess Bride, those kinds of fun historical adventures. But that's how it came about. So we're re-releasing Jaguars Another Game, the print book. Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to come out the same day as Jungle of Ashes on May 19th.
Yeah, yep, they'll both be available May 19th, and the ebook will be available sooner just because we want to get as many readers as possible. So then they will like it and order Jungle of Ashes.
We're gonna be like giving it away, right? There's gonna be a period where you could download it for free.
Yep, starting in March, yeah. And we did this with Jillian's, well, I don't even remember if it was the Rhino, I think it was the Rhino Keeper. We did a BookBub free read deal. We sold like 15,000 copies.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was #1 on the free Amazon for several days. And I will tell you what, finding that many readers has been insane, Brynn. So just prepare yourself, babe.
Joe's asking, well, Joe asked two questions. One, will the audiobook be on NetGalley? The ebook is on NetGalley now if you are a NetGalley user. I'm waiting for NetGalley to upload the audiobook. So I did the unproofed galley of the audiobook. I went ahead and sent those files. So those will be up on NetGalley soon. And then she asked about hardback or collector's editions. I would love to do that. In fact, Jillian had mentioned Book Vault the other day that they print collector editions, but we opted for the paperback, the ebook, and the audiobook for Jungle of Ashes. Well, let me start by showing the cover for Jaguars Another Game, then I'll show the cover for Jungle of Ashes, and then we can talk about it. So let me share my screen here. Oops. Well, I have Jungle of Ashes pulled up. So here is the cover. Brynn, why don't you just talk about what this how this came about?
First, I love this cover so much. I already have stickers printed of the tire with the flowers that I'm going to be giving out at every event. It was a lot of back and forth. I mean, we went through many rounds. Colin, it was like Colin was getting mad at me, guys. Because I was like, no, it's not ready. And I was very stubborn, and I kept insisting. I was like, no, 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 no. Until we got down to this. I think it's like the symbol of the book. We have the juxtaposition of the two like major forces in Jungle of Ashes. We have the industry and nature and Mother Nature and the environment. We also have masculine elements in the wheel and then feminine elements with the flowers. And then the water lily specifically, which that is that flower, it's a lily, is a very important symbol in the book as well. Joanna arrives at the Amazon wanting to see a lily more than any other plant. That is what she wants to see, is the giant water lilies that exist in the Amazon. So it is just really that tire is just, that's the focal point, that's the heart, that's the whole struggle of the book in a single image.
And Carolyn or Jillian, what are your impressions?
I love it. I feel like it makes sense in terms of the narrative, and like Joanna gets to the nature through the mechanical, So I really like that, and I really like that the rest of the cover is pretty simple, because then the tire really is the focus, and the sort of, I don't know, I really feel like I can sort of like see her like diving through the tire into the water.
I think for me, there's so much texture in the descriptions in the writing itself that the cover being like, hey, focus, because you're going to miss something if you don't, and the eyes drawn right to the tire. I think there's something to be said about that with a narrative as well. This book is, there's so much going on. The setting, the chaos, the people, the wealth, the poverty, but there's something deeper and more sinister at the core here. And I think that's exactly what this cover shows.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It is definitely different than what we started with. And Brynn forced me to institute a new policy.
Did I really? I didn't know. You have a whole new policy because of me?
I mean,
love that. I love a legacy.
now, but we're not doing any covers without having a meeting with the designer first. So
it's a good policy.
Yes, it is. It seems like common sense now, but hindsight is 2020. Okay, and here we have Jaguars Another Game. We actually have two versions of this. This is the paperback version. The ebook version is the same design, but it's green. So, Brynn, maybe you can start by talking a little bit about the original cover and then how you came out to land on this cover for the republication.
So do I have a copy of the OG? I do. So the original cover is this. It's the sword in the jungle and sort of sets the mood, but I thought it was a little too busy. I didn't think it represented all the different elements that the story has. So I love this cover so much. And I worked with the designer, Scott Cathy, amazing designer. He is on Instagram, does these crazy illustrations on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, he's at Scotto Sketch, Scotto with two T's. And and he's an amazing illustrator in addition to graphic designer. And so my brother, Josh, who I think is watching, actually came up with the concept of these like 3 symbols to represent the book. And then I started thinking about like their game pieces, and there's jaguars, another game, and each of these figures, the snake, the sword, the crown, references something in the story. So you have to read the book to understand why these particular symbols. And just they're little Easter eggs in the crown. Like, it's so amazing, Scott, is if you look in the crown, there are little jaguar heads. Like, 2 of the cutouts are 2 little jaguar heads. And then the handle of the sword is sort of a tropical bird. And so if you look at, and then you can find out like why the snake of all the animals that exist in Brazil. And there's a reason the snake may or may not show up, the sword, the crown, because the Portuguese royal family fled Napoleon to Rio. So the Portuguese royal family is in Rio de Janeiro during this story. So it's just very cool. A lot of Easter eggs. I love the color. And the ebook gets a different color because we couldn't decide between the red or the green. We love them both. And then Colin, your idea was brilliant. Like, well, we'll make one the print and one the ebook.
Yeah, it's really quite a striking cover and very different than the original. But yeah, I think it fits well, and such a fascinating history too, which is just another reason why I jumped at the chance to republish it with History Through Fiction. Well, I'm going to invite questions from the audience here. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll continue our conversation here. Brynn, maybe you could talk a little bit about both your multicultural background, your family background, and also what you do for a living and how that's incorporated into your storytelling.
So I mentioned earlier, my husband is from Rio de Janeiro, and our daughter is Brazilian American. She was born in Brazil, and so we are a multicultural, multilingual family. And my background, my master's degree is international communication, specializing in intercultural communication. So that comes to play in my storytelling. And so far, all of my stories involve different cultures coming into contact. And ultimately, all of my stories, they make the argument that curiosity should trump fear, and curiosity is a choice. And curiosity opens the door to so much love and joy from the people that you're going to meet rather than run away from. And because that has been my personal experience, that meeting people who are not exactly like you really only enriches your life. So that love of multicultural, that love of experiencing the world through the different people that live in it, that comes in all my stories. And then my cross-cultural background also helps me when writing from the perspective of a different culture. So I did study a lot of different communication styles and values and how people enculturate. And that does come across when I am writing people who are different from myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message, and it definitely comes through really strong with Joanna and Rafa and everything that happens there in the Amazon. And you can see when people aren't open to that curiosity, the tension and the problems it causes. Jillian, I wonder if I can bring you back in and talk about, so you blurbed this book. I wonder, now that you're super famous and have 2 really successful books and all these awards, are you getting a lot of requests from authors who maybe a few years ago you were the one making the request?
I actually have, and I was really surprised the other day I don't even know why I was looking. I was looking at Olivia Hawker's and Libby Grant's books, and I was just picking one to read. And I got onto the book that she asked me to blurb for her on her one about Roswell, which is an incredible book. And I was shocked to see that on the Amazon listing, I was the only author mentioned in the blurb section. And I was like, but I mean, I did say it was perfect for fans of Ray Bradbury. So maybe that's why, because, it was a pretty good blurb. But I think one of the coolest things about being an author is that people will ask you to read things, and you do get to put your own spin on it. And blurbs are so important. Like I read Brynn's book without a cover. There wasn't really any back copy. I mean, I knew it was set in the Amazon, and I knew what it was about because I knew there was a Fordlandia, but I kind of went in blind. And when you go in blind, and then you're like, what do I say to summarize this to a reader who might be on the fence? Not only is that a lot of pressure, but it's quite a privilege. So to be able to do that for spectacular books has been really incredible. And my favorite thing to do is after the book comes out is to get onto all of the reviews, like Goodreads, Amazon, social media, whatever, and copy and paste my blurb all over the place. I'm like, here it is. This is so good. 5 stars, 5 stars. So yeah, it's really cool. I haven't had any requests in 2026. But last year I had a goal to blurb 5 books, and I sure did that. So this year, I'm looking forward to what comes next with that. And it's been interesting to see the genres that I've been asked to blurb because I don't normally do sci-fi, and yet that Libby Grant book is definitely sci-fi. So, you know.
Carolyn, have you ever been asked to blurb a book?
No, I haven't. But it's interesting what you said, Jillian, about going in blind, because I was thinking that that's true of almost every book I narrate. I can do a little bit of research about the book, but I really don't know much at all about it. And I love that because I love just leaping in without any preconceived notions about what the story is or what the tone of the book might be.
Yeah, it's kind of a scary privilege. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, I'm seeing this before the world, and the world is going to rely on me to help interpret it.
Yes, exactly. And it is scary because I mean, I have to trust that my instincts about who the characters are, especially in situations where I don't have any contact with the author, that they've chosen me, but then I don't have a conversation with them, are right on. And I do trust that. But sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, what if I'm totally misinterpreting someone,
But I do think that's whenever an author puts their work into the world, as soon as it's in someone else's hand, they are going to bring their own interpretation to it. Like I
Right.
mean, I can't sit there next to everybody that's reading it and explain as they're reading, like, this is what I meant here. And every time someone's, you can only read it in my presence, so you can ask me any questions. And so I mean, people are going to get things wrong. People are going to put their own spin, and that is hard to let go of. I mean, honestly, Caroline, I was nervous before I started the audiobook. It took me a few days. So I was like, what if it doesn't sound right? I was really afraid because it sounds amazing. I didn't have anything to worry about, but it took me a few days because I was genuinely like, what if it doesn't sound like the Joanna I have in my head? Like
Well,
my Joanna.
absolutely. And then the filter I then put on it, I can't also be in control of how someone interprets whatever character voice I think of a certain way, right?
Mhm.
That might, strike a chord in them in a way that I didn't ever intend. So there's now,
I think that's the best thing about Carolyn's work, though, is that you're immediately immersed. Like you're just, and it's, I think I had like 2 corrections for her for both of my books. And the whole time you're like, I am currently in the world. And that's so weird to say, but you know exactly what I mean, right, Brynn? Like you
Yep.
are instantly in. And that is not a gift that I just started listening to audiobooks of my own free will this year. That is not something that everybody does. And sometimes I have to turn a book off because the narrator doesn't, I'm thinking too much about their voice and not enough about the story, but I've never experienced that with her.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice.
We do have some questions coming in. I'll address the one by Irene right up front. She asks if Jungle of Ashes is going to be translated into Portuguese or published in Brazil. And Brynn and I talked about that. I simply do not have the resources or expertise yet to make that happen. I mean, it will be published in Brazil. It's distributed worldwide, so it will be available in English in Brazil. But there are additional challenges to finding the right translator, additional cost to getting it translated, and it was just a little too overwhelming for me from a publisher side of things. But if anybody in our audience knows how to get that done and get it done cheaply, I'd love to hear from you.
Or if we can sell enough copies and it gets well known and a publisher comes to us, that's also a route. So we can just
Yes.
sell so many copies that a Brazilian publisher reaches out. Like, we will translate this for you.
Well, and you and I will be at a conference. All of us will be at the conference next month. I'm sure there will be a lot of smart people who have experience in these matters. Maybe we can figure it out there. We have a question from going back to curiosity and the importance of that. Ian asks, what are some obstacles to curiosity, both in the novel and in your own life?
Would say the same answer is true for both actually, and it's discomfort. It is uncomfortable to be in a situation if you don't understand not just the language being spoken, that's the most obvious, but if you don't understand the expectations of you for all the unspoken norms and unspoken rules for behavior, the gestures, the body language, even down to how close you can stand next to a person. What time are we going to eat? Like, how do I show respect here? I don't know the answers to that. I feel very uncomfortable, so I'm going to retreat. I'm going to retreat back to my people because this is hard. And it's embarrassing at best, possibly, maybe worst case scenario, maybe it's threatening. I don't know because I don't understand. And it is very uncomfortable to go someplace new. But if you can think, instead of running away, I want to understand so it doesn't feel as new. I'm gonna make it familiar to myself, and I'm going to sit with this discomfort. I'm not going to run away from it, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to make it comfortable. I'm going to stay here until it is comfortable for me. And that's in Jungle of Ash. That's been true for me personally. I cannot tell you how many times. Not only did I live in Brazil, I studied abroad in Morocco, in India. I volunteered in Croatia. I've traveled all over the world. I have very often been in situations where it's like, I really don't even know where I am right now. And I don't know how to ask people how to get to where I need to go. And it's nerve-wracking. But I'm so glad I didn't run away because my life has been so much richer because I chose not to run from the discomfort. And I have friends, people I love all over the world because of that. And Joanna makes that choice to be curious and to learn and to not shut down when when she gets to the unknown and she gets uncomfortable. And then there are others in Jungle of Ashes who just refuse to admit that anything is different. And if it is different, they are going to make it the way they want to. And just absolute denial and absolute refusal to acknowledge any way than what they want. And we see how that plays out and you can read the book and email me and say who you think was most successful by the end of the book.
I think you pretty much described any social event I've ever had to go to.
You just have to go down the street, go into a stranger's house down the street, and it's a new uncomfortable environment. So Colin, you are communicating cross-culturally every time you go out.
We have a couple more questions. I want to get to Emmanuel's here because we have two really amazing historical fiction writers. He wants to know advice for writers about getting and using research for historical fiction. Brynn, we saw your book with all those post-it notes. What's your advice for doing that research and then getting going to write a novel from it?
At some point, you have to stop and write the story. And that is really kind of a judgment call and varies author to author. But especially if you start doing research, you could do research forever. And it is a way to productively procrastinate, doing the scary part, which is making the stuff up. I see Jillian nodding. I'm going to hand over to Jillian. But I definitely am in the camp because historical fiction, you have some people like never change the history. Do it exactly as it happened in real life. Don't change the history. And these are the people that like, this is why I will never write a World War II novel because someone will inevitably send you an email that, no, that kind of plane actually wasn't used until 1944. And I was like, that's not the point. This is not a history book. This is not history of aviation. I am writing a story. So I absolutely will change historical details for the sake of a narrative because I lean into that it is historical fiction. And then in my author's note, I will direct to a nonfiction resource. So I will usually read like a big work of popular nonfiction that puts me in the place and time and then I write the story. And then I think of the people who might be there and I write a story. And then I fill in the gaps as necessary for the story that I want to tell. But that's me. It varies by author. Jillian, how do you handle research?
If I'm going for a secondary source like what you're talking about, I do the same thing. I'm currently drafting a book set in the French Revolution, and there are too many resources. So really what you kind of have to do is pick your top 3 and do not research anymore. It's like, these are the sources that I'm going to use. This is a published work. This is an authoritative author. That's what I'm going for. But one of the things that I've really learned how to do well, and that I think helps captivate my audience very well, is to use art from the time period as descriptors, as clothing, as hair, as people's expressions, not an interpretation of someone in 2026 trying to understand the French Revolution or a rhino in Paris in the year 1740, but actually understand what it was like to be there. The only way that you can do that is to either time travel or just look at the things that were created during that time around that topic. So I will pull up every single piece of art that was made during the time period about what I want to write. I will save it. You should see the folders in my phone. I have one that's called future fiction, which is everything that I think is really intriguing, and that has like a million different images in it. I have one that's called Clara. Every time I find a new rhino image. I have Porcelain Menagerie. Every single major real person that has been mentioned in my books, I have a photo of their portraits saved. That way you can describe them accurately. You can glean little personality things from them. You can research the backdrops, the backgrounds, things like that. Now for Brynn, that would have been hard because the Amazon is not conducive to art. And when my books are set in Europe, it's a little bit easier. My third book, which my agent is on submission with right now, Brynn talks about filling in the gaps. That book is set in 568 BC.
Wow.
So that one's a little more challenging because yes, there are cuneiform tablets. Yes, I can decipher some of them, but there are so many things that were missing from that narrative that I had to do a lot of research to actually make it work. And the art, once again, helped me through. I had a little bit of narrative just from the things that remained. So I always recommend looking in museum archives, using Pinterest, that can help you, and then making sure that you're looking at when that piece of art was actually created. Because once again, if you're looking at something that was made in 1990 about an 18th century topic, you might not be on the right track.
I love that, Jillian, using the art. Photographs. There are photographs of Fordlandia. There is a picture of John Rogie. And so for Fordlandia, I was able to get pictures of the houses that they were living in, of the plantation, of, the sick saplings, rows and rows and rows and rows of saplings. And
so you're telling me I need to write in more modern time periods,
yeah, I'm
so
saying
I can have
568
pictures.
BC might be hard to get primary sources, but if you go post camera, you can get photographs. But for Jungle of Ashes, I used paintings. The Portuguese court, when they came over, brought painters and artists, and there's some really famous paintings of the time period. And in fact, one of the scenes in Jaguars of Ashes is set directly in a painting. Like I saw that painting and it is a scene. So I have a scene take place in that painting.
Brynn, you're doing the same thing I have been doing. You're getting the titles mixed up.
I am.
They both start with a J.
Start with J.
Yes,
They both start. That was my fault. That was my fault. Yeah. Jungle and Jaguars. Yeah.
Well, this has
and
been
that's how myself, I refer to them as shorthand, just Jaguars and Jungle.
Yeah,
that's in my head how I refer to them.
Well, this has been immensely fun. I'm so glad that we could do it. I want to ask one more question because Melissa gave us a softball. Before I do, I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for supporting the work that we're doing and just for hanging out with us. I'm going to post a link to History Through Fiction's online store. So if you want to pre-order directly from us, you can do that. You'll get it before you can get it anywhere else because it officially comes out May 19th, but I'll ship those out March 19th, assuming I have the physical copies. It'll be around that date. You can also, and so the question that Melissa asked is, how can we help this be a successful launch? So I'll start just by saying, well, you can buy the book, you can pre-order the book. You can get it from your library. You can request it at your library, and you can just tell people about it. Word of mouth is probably the best thing you can do because, there's a limited number of people here in this audience. But if we can grow that audience and then they grow that audience, like that's the exponential thing we're looking for. So just anybody you can tell, your mom, your nephew, your teacher, anybody, tell them about the book, just like Jillian and I did when we went to McPherson College. I think that'll be the best thing you can do to help it be successful. But I'll ask each one of you, what do you think can people do to help make this a successful book launch?
I want to hear from Jillian because she had successful book launches.
I think for me, it's networking, making sure that authors are singing your praises. And if everyone could share the cover on their social media in whatever way, shape, or form that they can, those are going to be spectacular. Because if one person shares it and then one person shares it, it's just that circle that goes on so that people can actually find the book. And I think I'm going to reach out to McPherson College and say, hey, you should really have a Zoom with this author and see if we can get all 700 of those auto restoration students a copy of this thing.
Karen, what about your perspective as a narrator?
This might be controversial, but I would say leave a 5-star review because honestly, reviews less than that are just in the audio world sort of detract, honestly. So if you feel like this was a 4.5, listen, then don't leave a review.
We love our 5-star reviews, so we would appreciate. I already gave it a 5 stars. I can only give it one time.
5-star reviews. And leaving a written review, even if it's just a sentence or two, it doesn't have to be a paragraph. It doesn't have to be a full synopsis. Of course, those are wonderful, and I'm like amazed anyone gave me that much of their time after already reading the whole book. But a few sentences, how much you loved it, recommend, couldn't put it down. This was my favorite part. People's time and energy is so precious. It's honestly hard to get someone to buy in to read a book, especially nowadays. I know my own personal attention is shot. Like I have no attention span at the moment because of anxiety. So asking someone to sit down and read a book cover to cover when the Olympics are on, when there's the Super Bowl, when there's so many, TV shows and streaming services, it's a big ask of someone. Like I don't take that for granted. Whenever anyone has read my book, I know how many hours that took them. And I am so appreciative because as a full-time mom who is currently single parenting while my husband's in Brazil and plus trying to be an author, my free time and my free energy is so precious. Those are my two most precious resources. So if anyone gives me those two things, their time and their energy reading the book, I am so grateful. And just a couple written words can help someone else make the choice to invest those two resources. So yeah, I thank you. I think I know for a fact, a couple people here in the Zoom call have already read it and have left a review on Goodreads. And I'm so thankful. And it made me cry. And it was great. So thank you so much. Also, you can leave a nice review and make an author cry.
Yeah. So. I just left mine. 5 stars on Goodreads, already up.
Nice. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here. This has been really fun. Brynn will be doing in-person events if you're down in the Southeast. I'm sure she'll have those on her website soon. And
watch my social media. And I do all kinds of Zoom events. I love virtual events. I love talking, in case you haven't noticed, through the course of this hour. So I'm happy to do Zoom events. I'm happy to do book clubs. So just reach out, leave a review. I'm excited for the next few months. I can't wait till May 19th.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Brynn, and thanks again to everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Caroline.